Hello there. Welcome, Arizona Cardinals fans, to the Bleav in Arizona Cardinals podcast brought to you by FanDuel. I'm joined today by Bucky Brooks. We're here to talk about the Cardinals. And as we get started, Bucky, how are you doing as we enter the bulk of the NFL offseason?
This is a fun part. Now that we're back in the mix after the draft, it's about OTAs, mini camps, kind of setting the table for training camp. Once we get to this time of the year, Blake, it is almost on and popping. So I'm really excited about what's about to happen.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about just the Cardinals' expectations this year. Currently, the FanDuel odds are at minus 140 for Arizona to finish with under 4.5 wins.
Ooh.
That's even lower than the Dolphins, which is pretty crazy. They're the favorites for the worst record in the NFL. Do you think that's realistic, or do you think that Arizona, with some of the talent additions, could surprise people this year?
Yeah, I think some of that is impacted and influenced by the fact they play in probably the toughest division to be in. When you think about collectively the Rams, the Seattle Seahawks, and the 49ers. And the fact that I mentioned the Rams are for the Seahawks is crazy because the Seahawks are the defending world champs, but that's the kind of cachet that this division has. Look, the San Francisco 49ers were holding on to the number one seed entering the last week of the season. Because of that, there's not an easy win for the Cardinals. And you think about 6 games against those teams, plus whatever you have slated on the schedule. I can understand the low expectations, but that doesn't mean that they can't exceed it. Because remember, every year we've seen a worse to first situation, someone that kind of comes from the cellar that finds their way into postseason. So it's not out of the realm of the possibility that we're talking about a team that is slept on and outperforms those early expectations.
Indeed. Part of those expectations are going to be reset now that Jonathan Gannon has been let go from the Cardinals. They bring in new head coach Michael Lafleur, formerly worked with Kyle Shanahan with the Niners, was the offensive coordinator for the Jets, spent the last couple years under Sean McVay with the Rams. And, of course, we all know his brother, Matt Lafleur, very winning head coach with the Green Bay Packers. What does Mike bring to the table, you think, as a head coach for the Cards this year?
Well, obviously, he's very familiar with the division. He's very familiar with the thought process and what is needed to win the division. And whenever you're building a team, the first thing you do is, how can we win a division? Because that secures the golden ticket to the postseason. So given his familiarity with those teams, he certainly understands how to build his team to be a nemesis of the teams that he used to work with and work for. I think it's really important that he has his own vision, and he has a brother who's been very successful doing it, and Matt, who has done it for a long time in Green Bay. All he has to do is follow the blueprint. Now, part of that blueprint features the quarterback, but if you get the right weapons on offense to go with the right defense, and then you drop the quarterback in, you have an opportunity to be successful. That has been the recipe for all of those teams that he's been with, and that'll be the recipe that he'll have to follow going forward with the Cardinals.
Let's talk about the biggest offseason additions for the Arizona Cardinals, the 2026 rookies, and that, of course, starts with Jeremiyah Love, drafted number 3 overall, 210 pounds, ran the 4.3, just phenomenal running back prospect when it talks about with the best maybe overall talent in the 2026 NFL draft. Cardinals did not necessarily need a running back. They had signed Tyler Algier to a 2-year deal. Obviously, you're bringing back James Conner, and they drafted Trey Benson a while back. How does Jeremiyah Love and his skill set fit in with Mike LaFleur running this new sort of zone blocking scheme?
Yeah, this is interesting because when I think about Mike LaFleur and why he would want a player like Jeremiyah Love, a lot of it is very similar to when the Rams just took over and they had a young quarterback in Jared Goff and they had Todd Gurley behind him. And what they did with him being an offensive player of the year, they utilized him in a variety of ways. Not only running inside and outside, catching the ball out the backfield, finding ways to create mismatches. And because you have Tyler Algier backing him up, because you have James Conner also in the mix, he's kind of a luxury item. But it does set the table for this team to be a very physical team, a team that runs the football and utilizes the run game to set up whatever they want to do in the passing game to Trey McBride. I just think that Jeremiyah Love has an opportunity to be one of these LaDainian Tomlinson types, one of these Reggie Bush types, a guy that can run it successfully, but also impact the game as a receiver out the backfield. And given LaFleur's ability to see so many of those guys within the division that were able to do so, namely Christian McCaffrey, I think you'll see some of that utilization to see if they can kind of prop up and energize this offense.
Yeah, just thinking about how many times I've seen Christian McCaffrey run an option route against the Cardinals for much of a large gain. Seeing that from the Cardinals' perspective may be really fun. You're talking about like LT types. There's been a lot of criticism of the Jeremiyah Love pick because of the contract that was handed out. It's now going to be 53 million guaranteed, higher than any other running back in the NFL as far as guaranteed money goes, trending already top 7 or 8 when it comes to dollars per year. Some people lean toward the team building perspective. Like Cardinals don't really have a franchise quarterback that we know of on the roster yet. People are wondering if they're going to waste some of his prime years. Other people say just take the best player available, being able to add that talent to open up a lot of other things for the rest of the offense. Which side do you kind of fall on when it comes to how things get structured for when you're building a team for the long term versus, hey, like you got a chance at the best player in the 2026 draft. Take that guy, even if you got a Tyler Algier already on the roster.
You can never go wrong taking great players. Never. So I'm always going to skew towards best player available. Having played in Green Bay under Hall of Fame executive and Ron Wolf, having scouted for John Stanley, those guys who really leaned heavily on the Ron Wolf's teachings, they talked about always take the best player, because if you take the best player, even at a position of strength, what you can do is auction off one of those pieces to get an asset that helps one of your weak points of your roster. So for Jeremiyah Love, even though we had Tyler Algier, even though we had Connors in the hole, he's an upgrade over those guys. So I want to take him. I want to give him an opportunity to be the bell cow for our offense. And even though we don't have a quarterback who we deem to be ready, he is going to make the entire offense better. I expect him to have an outstanding career, but more importantly, I expect him to make immediate impact as a rookie. And even if you have to run it through the running game before you're able to kind of throw it all over the yard to the weapons that you have on the outside, that is a good thing, not a bad thing. You can't go wrong taking a really great player.
Yeah, with that rookie season right now, Jeremiyah Love is tied on FanDuel odds at plus 430 for Offensive Rookie of the Year. What do you think is a realistic season outlook for Love? Because I don't think that he's going to – he's obviously going to have some carries that are going to be split for the most part. When it comes to him as a rookie for like rushing or receiving yards, what could our expectations be for Jeremiyah Love?
I'll put the number right at 1,500 and 1,500 scrimmage yards. So any combination of rushing yards and receiving yards, if he hit the 1,500 yard mark, I think that's a very successful year. I would think a realistic thing would be maybe 1,000 to 1,100 yards, and then you got 400 yards receiving. To me, that is doable when you think about over a 17-game season, you're talking about maybe 70 yards a game to be able to put that up. That should be something they can do with the upgrades and the enhancements they've done to the offensive line. I would look for him to get a heavy workload, even though they're going to split the carries and have some of those other guys jump in the backfield and make things happen.
Yeah, I've got it somewhere maybe around like 800 or so rushing yards and 600 receiving yards, seeing some third down work and then picking up potentially as the season goes on. The last time the Cardinals had, I believe, a 1,500-yard season from a running back, it was David Johnson back in 2018. That was also a rough year for the Arizona Cardinals. They finished with the number 1 pick, ended up selecting Kyler Murray, but I've got that as kind of like a benchmark for seeing what Jeremiyah Love could be. And I think that he could be right up in there with the Rookie of the Year on the offensive side of the ball, depending on how Fernando Mendoza does with the Raiders.
Yeah, look, he's going to be one of the front runners going in just because there was so much excitement about him during the pre-draft process. He's a household name. A lot of eyes are going to be on him. And as you know, the more eyes are on him in fantasy, the more likely the buzz is going to be about him in reality. Here's the thing that we do know. When you have a young coach and you're looking at your roster and you're looking at your offense and what can get going, you know that the easiest way to set the table is to get the ball in the hands of your best player. And if he's at running back, you can hand it to him 15 to 20 times and throw swings and screens and all of those things to allow him to impact the game. I know it's going to be a backfield by committee in some way, shape, or form, but I think he's going to have plenty of opportunities to make his mark. I think he should be the front runner to maybe be the Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, that's awesome news for Cardinals fans who are going to be looking forward to that, because the rest of the season is something that remains to be seen. Cardinals went and doubled down in the NFL draft when it came to running the football. They go out and get Chase Bantis at the top of round 2, guy who is a athletic freak, did every drill at the combine this year, competitive, from New Jersey. You got a blue collar mentality that a lot of coaches talked about. And he's also a guy that is probably going to slot in at the offensive guard spot. What kind of an impact can he have with this new zone blocking scheme? I think he could do either power or zone blocking, was part of his flexibility coming out. When watching a lot of tape, he just would be able to carve open a lot of lines. Wasn't used as much on counter plays, but he did show athleticism to be able to be on the move in some of those spots as well. What are you thinking about his impact as a rookie offensive guard?
He's one of my favorite players to watch in the draft. I think he's a talented technician. He has some nastiness to his game that you absolutely love as a tone setter on that front line. In his own scheme, his athleticism and his technique will flourish. It will allow them to really get to the edges as he's sealing that interior part of the offensive line on those front side runs. And then in pass protection, he's a masterful quick setter, meaning he's going to get his hands into the defender quickly. He's going to eliminate some of that penetration up the middle. That means regardless who's playing quarterback, they should be comfortable throwing right from the middle of the pocket, which is exactly what you want if you're Mike LaFleur. You want a guy that is comfortable in the pocket, and the only way to do that is have Chase Bantis really protecting him as he's trying to create a fortress in front of the quarterback.
Yeah, Cardinals also signed Isaac Seumalo away from the Steelers, and Chase Bantis, one of those guys. He's a little bit shorter arm, which is why he's not at the outside tackle spot. But once he got his hands on you, it was over as far as it came to protection. Let's do another small school shout out. Cardinals didn't add a lot to the defensive side of the room, but they did draft Caleb Proctor out of an FCS school, and I Bleav it was Southeast Louisiana. I loved him in the pre-draft process. Just watching him as an upfield penetrator, being able to see him against LSU and some of the high leverage competition. What do you know about him as far as an addition to Arizona's defensive line?
Well, look, man, anytime you take a small school guy, what you're hoping is that some of the flashes that you saw in tape are able to translate. Now, you also recognize that it may take him a little longer to find his thing. If he's a popcorn kernel, it may take him a little while for it to pop and fully develop on that stage. But I love the energy. I love the motor. The effort stands out every time you see him play. The relentlessness gives him a chance to be a factor. And surrounded by some veterans that should command some attention, he should be able to kind of make his mark as a key contributor early before ascending to a role that might see him as a part-time starter or a guy that is a valuable role player for this team.
Yeah, absolutely. Just thinking about him next to Walter Nolan, if Nolan's able to draw some of those double teams, being able to see what Proctor is able to do to split upfield. I think Arizona, they're missing Calais Campbell, who goes to the Ravens this past offseason, so they're really going to be depending on some of these younger players in the rotational defensive line, along with another veteran like Andrew Billings. When it comes to small school adjustments, Proctor was the first FCS player that was drafted this past year. Mm-hmm. A lot of that, I think, is just because NIL money has made it where more and more players are now transferring and moving along into different places. He chose to kind of stay at his school. What do you think as far as when it comes to NIL and players, and how has that impact really changed the landscape of college football? Because in the Cardinals side, they really get the first FCS player because all of these other guys are transferring to different schools for the name, image, likeness dollars.
Yeah, it's interesting because it used to be viewed as a negative when a guy would bounce around and transfer schools. Like you saw him as somebody who was afraid of competition. You saw him as someone who wouldn't stick it out. As soon as things get hard, is he going to flee and run? Now it's not viewed exactly in that light, but you do want to discover, like, okay, what made him stick? What made him go? And if they do stick, then it's kind of a testament not only to their loyalty, but their belief in the coaches that helped him get to this point where they are on the stage where NFL scouts are taking a look at him. The overarching theme when it comes to like small school guys and whether they stay or go, how do they stack up in those high leverage games? Meaning when they have an opportunity to punch above their weight, do they show up? How do they handle playing Power 4 schools? And even when we're talking about a very transient game, as a scout, you're looking for matchups. So regardless of where you bounce around, I am looking to see how you perform against a team that has other similar graded pros. If you can hold your own in games like that, then I'm pretty confident that you're going to hold your own when you get to the league.
I definitely agreed there. Let's kind of start to wrap it up a bit, talking with the weakest area for the Arizona Cardinals as they enter this season, which is the quarterback room. And that's just because when you're talking about when you don't have one quarterback, you've got three. That's kind of the spot that the Cardinals are in. Currently, they're expected starter Jacoby Brissett is holding out. He's not showing up at OTAs, wants a new deal. He ended up being exceptional as a passer last season, but in a lot of different ways, some of the metrics just didn't quite add up because they were throwing the ball so much. Obviously, we talked about Cardinals with 31st in rushing. We know they want to be a bit more balanced this past year. What are some of the strengths that you see of someone like Jacoby Brissett when it comes to Arizona? Because a lot of fans, honestly, they look at that 1-11 record and some are completely out on Brissett. Well, I saw the offense do take steps forward when he was in there this past season, and it seemed like the run game wasn't really supporting him. What are some thoughts you have on Jacoby, at least, and is it right for him to be holding out for getting a new restructured deal for the Cardinals?
Yeah, really tough one because there's so many layers to this answer. Jacoby Brissett is a solid, what we call bridge quarterback, a solid guy to get you from one franchise quarterback to the other. He has played enough games where, look, he's going to run the offense the way that you see fit. He's going to kind of limit the amount of turnovers and mistakes that he has for him to position. I don't know how much he can elevate your team, but he's solid. If you're the Cardinals right now, where you are in the rebuilding process, you're looking for stability. You're looking for someone that can just turn out solid performances until the rest of the team catches up and exceeds what he's able to deliver. Now, I understand why he's holding out, because if you tell me that the backup quarterback is set to earn more money than the starter, we got to go address that, and we got to sweeten the pot and make sure that it's right. How successful he will be in that strategy, we'll see. But I understand why he is, and eventually I believe the Arizona Cardinals will cave a little bit, meet him somewhere in the middle when it comes to his demands, and use him as the starting quarterback. That said, Carson Beck is intriguing because Carson Beck follows on the profile of guys who tend to have a lot of success in this league, guys who have had a lot of snaps, guys who've been 3-year starters, guys who played for 2 championship caliber programs and had success as the leader of those teams. They tend to kind of find a way to make it. I'm fascinated by him coming into the league as a 3rd-round pick, but I'm even more curious as to how they're going to build him up and put him in a position where he can showcase his talents in the preseason to see if maybe he can be the starting quarterback this season at some point.
No, I agree. It seems like a lot of Beck's strengths are full field reads. Like he did very well off of play action dropbacks in college. Obviously, there's been some questions post UCL injury about the arm strength for the most part. What do you see as some of the strengths and weaknesses of Carson Beck? Because I think he translates very well to Mike Lafleur's offense when it comes to being able to read the entire field, drop back, and then some of the accuracy that he demonstrated in college at Georgia and Miami.
Yeah, he reminds me a lot of Kirk Cousins when Kirk Cousins was coming out of Michigan State. And I say that understanding that Kirk Cousins became a Pro Bowl player. He's the most, he's one of the best business people that I know in terms of the way that he has manipulated the franchise tag and earned a lot of money. And Carson Beck, what you have is a guy who has, I think, 43 starts entering the league. Coming out of college with that much experience, the amount of reps that he runs, he should understand how to operate the game and direct the game from the line of scrimmage. He has seen enough ball to be able to kind of jump in and understand how to manage those situations. And when surrounded by a stellar supporting cast, he certainly can win. When I look at what the Cardinals have around him, there's no reason why he can't win with what he's been given. Trey McBride, we talk about Michael Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., the running backs that they have, including Jeremiyah Love. There's a lot of talent around him. To me, it's about Carson Beck understanding who he is and staying within the boundaries of his game. If he just does that, kind of plays his part and doesn't try to become the playmaker when he's really more of a game manager, the Cardinals can have a lot of success with him as QB1.
No, I would agree. I think the biggest question, this will be the last question for today, is when would be the best time to then potentially look at putting Carson Beck into the lineup? Cardinals have a rough schedule this year. They played the NFC West 3 times in the first 6 weeks. They also then follow up with the Broncos, Cowboys, Seahawks, Rams, and Chiefs. So if you're talking about daunting, that's about as daunting as it gets in the NFL. Is that kind of a spot where would you lean more toward kind of putting Beck, maybe testing some of those feet to the fire a bit earlier on in the season if it makes sense, or with an easier back half of the schedule, should the Cardinals give him maybe 5 or 6 games down the stretch to see what they have before making a quarterback decision? Do you have a feeling on either side of kind of that dialectic?
I think a lot of it depends on Carson Beck and what he shows you. If he shows you that he's ready to handle the heavy workload, first in OTAs and minicamp, then in training camp and in preseason games, you roll with him. Now, he's going to have to be granted that opportunity, whether it's an injury to Jacoby Brissett, an extended holdout. Something has to happen for Beck to get all of those opportunities to show people that he's ready for it. But if he flashes enough where you can Bleav that, okay, man, we might be able to do this, I would 100% give him a chance to make it happen. And just remember this, there was a time when Nathaniel Hackett was an offensive coordinator and Blake Bortles was the quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And he found a way to build an offense that allowed Blake Bortles to play at a level where he led the Jacksonville Jaguars to an AFC championship. I'm not saying Carson Beck is Blake Bortles, and I'm not saying that this is a team that is ready to vie seriously for playoff contention, but I do know that they can find various ways to set the young quarterback up for success. If he shows that he's ready for a big workload, I would give him that workload really early in the season.
Absolutely. One of the other additions the Cardinals made on the offensive side of the ball was Nathaniel Hackett. Now, he didn't have the best reputation or the best time with the New York Jets, at least in his time as a head coach, but in the offseason interviews with OTAs beginning, players have lit up about him. He's not a play calling offensive coordinator. What could be his impact, though, that he could have for the Cardinals this year?
Well, first, I got to tell you, man, anyone who knows Nathaniel Hackett, everyone that I've talked to that has worked with him, that has seen him kind of climb the ranks, they just talk about how he's such a great dude. And sometimes you just want to have those guys on your coaching staff because they kind of bring the energy that you're looking for to spread to the masses of the players and those things. Because he's been a head coach, because he's been a play caller, he is someone that Lafleur can lean on to bounce ideas off of. How would you handle these situations? How should I manage this? Because there's so many responsibilities that go with the head coach. Because Hackett has been an offensive coordinator before, he can entrust him to kind of run the meetings, set up some of the things when it comes to practice, run different parts of practice while he has to tend to other aspects of the team. He is a valuable resource for a young first-time head coach to lean on. And so it makes sense to have him and some of the other senior assistants that he has on the staff.
No, definitely agree. That's one of the areas of having experience on the staff. That was one of the things that was a struggle with Jonathan Gannon, was it was all brand new first-time position coaches, coordinators. That's something I think Nathaniel Hackett will be a vital piece. Speaking of vital pieces, one of the biggest questions for this year, after the first 2 years, he'd not managed to reach 1,000 yards. There were some injuries last year. One of the biggest things Cardinals fans have wondered about is Marvin Harrison Jr. He's had a less than auspicious start to his career in the league, but there still seems to be the talent that's present there that was worth a top 5 overall pick in 2024. What needs to change for him to be able to live up to those lofty expectations?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot on him. Anytime you're a top 5 pick and you have the weight of the world on your shoulders, sometimes you just need someone that believes in you and finds a way to put you in your comfort zone as a playmaker. And so for Lafleur, that is coming in and really understanding, what does Marvin Harrison Jr. do really, really well? We can't worry about draft picks and status and expectations that came along with him arriving from Ohio State, but what can we do to maximize who he is on the perimeter? And I think you start with that and you work backwards. If he does certain things well, we want to feature him in those roles as much as possible, and then have the complementary players around him, Mike Wilson and others, do what they do really well. Because I'm going to be honest, the number one option in that passing game is Trey McBride. If you build it around Trey McBride and we feature Marvin Harrison Jr. and Mike Wilson as complements, this offense can be successful. Regardless of how he came in and how he was ballyhooed and celebrated, your job now is to try and figure out a way to maximize him and put him in the best situations. Maybe you alleviate some of the pressure on him by making him more of a complement to the offense as opposed to the focal point of the offense.
Absolutely, yeah. With having Wilson hitting 1,000 yards last season for the first time in his career, obviously McBride is an all-world type of tight end. And of course, they added a certain running back we'll talk about here in a bit who can do it all as a receiver. But last year, the offense was not too much of an issue for Arizona. Last year, they were top 5 in passing yards, although the running attack was 31st in rushing. They still were bottom 10 in points per game, but the defense was really rough. They were bottom 10 in every single metric in the defensive side of the ball. They keep Nick Rallis as defensive coordinator, and they didn't really make a whole lot of changes to the most part on the defensive side. They're kind of expecting guys to stay healthy. What do you think Nick Rallis needs to do to be able to get the most out of guys like Walter Nolan and Will Johnson for the defense to bounce back this year?
Yeah, so a lot of it is being able to kind of figure out, okay, who are the people that we can build around? Who are blue chip players? what are we looking to do? And it's also matching up with the tough teams that you have in the division. I think is building upon the flashes that we saw at times last year, the playmaking ability, some of the disruption that we saw within the front seven, but who is going to emerge as those guys that can be the leaders, the blue chip players? I know Budda Baker is going to bring it every time he shows up and how he plays for them, but who else is going to join him? I think a big part of this is identifying who your blue chip players are and finding a way to put them in situations where they can impact the game the most.
For sure. Last year, the Cardinals were among some of the league leaders in playing quarters coverage. They also are a team that, when it comes to following trends, they have a unique style of defense, a lot of safety rotations. Without Jonathan Gannon there, do you think that there's any sort of trends that the Cardinals could follow as far as the league goes that could change as far as the coverages this year? Because last year they had a ton of injuries to the cornerback spot. Some guys are still coming off of injuries. I'm just curious if you think there's going to be any changes that the Cardinals could make to adopt league trends that we're seeing with most of the teams playing cover two and trying to get teams to run the ball as kind of the yin and yang as the NFL goes back and forth. With one trend goes and they play cover two, you see teams run the ball. What could be some trends the Cardinals could maybe adopt that the rest of the league is using for some changes this year?
Well, it'd be interesting because the league is also about to go to a thing where we're going to see more teams using 12 and 13 personnel. So how do they handle those things? How do they handle the ability to manage their defense with all the bigs on the field? When I look at what they have and what they want to do, they certainly want to play some light boxes with quarters, but it's going to be increasingly difficult to do that if people are putting the big bodies on the field, the heavy formations. I think the league is waiting to see how people are going to adapt and react to that. Because the Rams, a division rival, had so much success in 13 personnel, you're going to continue to see that be a big part of it. And you're going to see people begin to prepare not only to have that as part of their offensive arsenal, but they're going to defend more of that in mini camps and training camps. I think it's yet to be determined in terms of the new trend and how the Cardinals can jump in. But I do know stopping multi-tight end formations is going to be a big part of whatever they do, because it's coming, and the draft reflected that that is going to be a big part of the thinking that offensive coordinators have around the league.
For sure. The hope, obviously, is that the Cardinals, by moving to some of this 12 and 13 personnel, bringing that over from the Sean McVay scheme under Mike Lafleur, that would help with the team being able to defend the 12 and 13 personnel, at least when it comes to some of the defensive adjustments that have been made. How do you think Budda Baker is able to fit into some of that? Because he's smaller, but we've been able to see, at least as far as star players for the Cardinals, they don't have many, and he's one of those guys that I've been able to see him play strong in the box, as well as being able to, while he's gaining a couple of years for the most part, he still has been very good overall in coverage. How does he factor into some of this defensive adjustment that the team is making and that the rest of the league is making to 12 and 13 personnel?
Well, Budda Baker is also part of a trend. As much as I talk about 12 and 13 personnel, with the tight ends being a big part of it, you're seeing more teams utilize 3 safety looks. Budda Baker is a big part of that because his versatility, his ability to play in the slot, his ability to make plays in the box, and if needed, to be a split safety, he's shown the ability to do that. I think the big thing for Budda Baker is you want to make sure that you put him in a position to impact the game as much as possible. And given his success around the ball, even coming off the edge and blitzes and making splash plays, you just want to make sure that somewhere within that second level, he's given the freedom to roam and to make plays on the ball, because he's one of the best see ball, get ball defenders that we have in this league.
No, definitely. At least he seems to be one of those players who's gotten better with age, like a fine wine, which has been very fun. Bucky, it's been a pleasure having you on today. Thank you so much again for being able to join to talk a little bit about the Cardinals today.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It was always fun.
Absolutely. Thank you guys again, Cardinals fans, for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and write a review. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you again, everyone, and go Cardinals.